Last night I was walking through the grounds with Dr. Deb, and I said something to her which actually is something I truly believe, something that is both from my head and my heart, and really defines Dr. Deb in a way that I feel comfortable presenting her. And ultimately what I said was, Deb, in my experience, Dr. Drake, you are the foremost expert on integrative medicine in North America, in the world, not even North America, I'm sorry, but in the world. Now, that's a lot to live up to, for sure it is. And please don't get me wrong, she's totally nuts. Completely. But we're all making all this shit up every day, all the time. I am, you are, every one of us is, every time they walk into our clinic. But nobody's bullshit baffles more than Dr. Drake. When I first started in my career in biofeedback in, I guess it goes back to 2002, something like that. Yeah, 2001. I came out of my class, and my experience of education was never seeing the box, being handed the box, as I had been subspaced from Canada to China. And I'd never seen it. There were internet filters, couldn't see the box, and they handed me this plastic box that in my mind was this giant machine that could subspace me from Canada to China. It was massive in my mind with like satellite dishes and spinning shit. And they hand me this little plastic box and I'm like, oh God, I've been suckered. Like, honey, you're 8 months pregnant. We just put every dime we have. We don't have a house. We don't have a car. We don't have a couch. We have 2 backpacks, a plastic box, and a baby on the way in a month. Yeah, that was my introduction to biofeedback. And then on day 2, I'm in my beginner class, and somebody says, have you ever seen Professor Nelson speak? And I said, no. They're like, did you know he wears a dress when he lectures? I'm like, oh, shit. I've been suckered, and I've been suckered by a transvestite. Which, for whatever reason, hurt more. And I have no issue with transgender, but I just felt like it was just one more thing, you know? And then on day 3... Dave Cowan, my instructor at the time, and, you know, God bless Dave, love the man, miss him, one of the beautiful, beautiful people, very crazy, but beautiful, beautiful guy. Miss Dave so much, and he's totally been here all weekend because I've been thinking about him all weekend. So big love up to you, Dave, up and out, because I don't know necessarily that you're there, you could be there. But anyway... Dave proceeds to explain that the world's run by reptilians, and that's okay because this device has something that can work on it, so oh shit, been suckered by a transvestite, and I've joined a cult. This was my introduction to biofeedback. Oh, and if we're going to make sure that it's working, what we're going to do is take the most advanced medical device in the world, quote unquote, and we're going to confirm its efficacy with a rock and a string. Oh, yep, the Matrix is accurate today, right? I'm thinking, oh shit. I got home, I did not know what to do. But when I negotiated my deal, what I negotiated was all of their DVDs at the time, all of their training DVDs. And I came across this one training DVD. I hadn't met Dr. Drake yet, and it was her Leaky Gut DVD. Anybody ever see Dr. Drake's Leaky Gut DVD? That Leaky Gut DVD set the foundation for my practice, for my beginner understanding in holistic medicine, what was happening, and foundational fundamental breakdown and stress in the body. It is from her work that I stepped forward and ultimately created my experience within biofeedback. It was one of my foundational platforms of which I was able to grow, understand, and thrive. And so I'm sure it's not just me, but many of us have had that experience through the likes of Dr. Drake's work. And if you've not had the pleasure, Put on your seatbelt, hold on to your hat. Shit's about to get real. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Drake.
It is wonderful to see you all here. Thank you so much for embracing me again after I've sort of been away for a decade in the trenches of research. And is my mic a little bit too hot there? It's okay? Well, I know that you all love the Skio and the new Pulse 9, or Quest 9. I mean, it's just ripping in speed, so it's right up my alley. I would like to take you on a speedy journey because the basics that you need, I'm going to go over in theory for the first maybe 20 minutes, because if you don't get the understanding of the Verhoeven score, you won't understand anything about the bioelectric body and why you're doing any of this. So I want to take you back to kindergarten about what is that Verhoeven score? Are you sure you really know what it means? Because I can guarantee you that is so full of information, so full of guidance, that if you get that right, you get everything else right. You understand the navigation, you understand the direction of where you want to go. So I'm going to jump into a quick, you can go ahead. I want to tell you a little bit about Las Vegas, the Sin City. Well, here we are in Sin City, but you know, our whole bodies are Sin City. We are a walking evolution of the sexually transmitted diseases of 8 generations and our genetics and our toxic load. So I find it ironic that we're coming here to start our cleanup. I kind of think that's apropos. I'd like to talk a little bit about where I've been, because it's important for you to understand that today we're talking about legalities, moralities, ethics. Everything to do with your practice is how you talk, how you present yourself, and what you say. And I happen to have a lot of experience that was taken right to the head of the class of confrontation with the medical world. And so I'd like to just let you know about who I really am, not what you might see in the press. So I'm a musician. I come from a family of 6 kids. We're all musicians. My mother's a sweet Adeline. I've been involved with music since before I came out of the womb and submersed in it all my life. I'm a musician and a composer. And I've been making biofeedback enhanced body music with the Skio enhanced in my music to get people who can't afford to come to my clinic or whatever. We could give them biofeedback enhanced music. So that's kind of one of my hobbies. But I'm a humanitarian doctor now. I've been a professional in the healthcare field for 40 years. And I basically started as a kinesiologist. Then I went into biochemistry. I did research in Edmonton, Alberta, at the University of Alberta. I went back to McMaster Medical School. The first day we got to school, they said there's no exams, no classes, and no lectures. You have to teach yourself everything in medicine because all the books in the library are 10 years old and 10 years out of date. So everybody lined up for the washroom after the dean said that, and we all said, oh my God, 3 years of teaching ourselves. But it turned out to be the most fantastic experience of my life because 5 of us would get together twice a week and tell each other what we learned. And by learning in a group, which has been proven by the Navy and the military, learning in small groups is the #1 experiential way to learn things. So I want you to sort of feel the experience of learning with me today. I then went in to become a family doctor and then an emergency physician. And we didn't have enough murders in Canada. They sent me to the United States so I could get my trauma degree. And I was in San Francisco, Moffitt Long during the AIDS epidemic. I was in the Beth Israel Hospital in Harvard in Boston. And also my last rotation on my career before I graduated was in Detroit City. I was a gunshot stab wound and rape victim casualty officer. So my little white suburban middle class eyeballs got kind of yanked out. And I went back into medicine for 5 years in emergency, then 20 years in family medicine. And one particular afternoon, I went to a convention on functional medicine in Vancouver with my girlfriend and her 8-year-old hell on wheels, fire-setting autistic son who had some kind of an allergy during the convention and ran onto the convention floor. And some lady saw him freaking out and running through all the booths. And she grabs him by the neck and says, "Hey, Sonny, come and sit here on my music computer. Let me see what's bugging you." And I come running up in my red high heels going, what can I do about this kid? And she goes, "I'll show you in 3 minutes." And she goes, "Yes, this is a music mixer." And I'm going, I understand this. And so she looks at the Skio matrix, and the kid says mercury poisoning. His mother's dentist was arrested for putting 35 fillings in her mouth. So he was born in a womb full of mercury. So she goes, "Well, can I have your permission to invert the mercury?" And I said, "What do you mean invert?" She goes, well, if you put the debit to the credit, it equals 0. So I see that Mercury is here, so I'll put minus Mercury and we'll just collapse it and see how he does. And I'm kind of going, okay, I understand banking. I mean, I understand it. But I didn't understand what was about to happen. And 30 minutes later, this kid goes, oh. That night, he's beautiful, he's polite. The next morning, he's even more polite. And on it went to that child's day, and life was changed in that afternoon. He went on to become a top student, the valedictorian of his school, the top football player, and it was a tremendous jolt to my ego as a doctor that I could be working for 20 years to try and get a little smidgen of help. And in this 1/2 hour, this entire life was changed like that. So I went, okay, this is for real. So I bought 5 of them. I went to my office. I trained all of my staff. And I turned my medical clinic into a biofeedback clinic. People with this and that were getting better in ways that I could never see. My prescription rates were going down. My people were getting well. They were referring people to me. I was doing training. I went on a 50-city tour, 60 cities around the world teaching skio and getting fantastic results. And when I came back to Canada, I took care of a woman with a brain tumor. Her husband called me at 3 a.m. and said, we're doing the last rites on our marriage vows at the same time. She's going to die in an hour. I said, she was fine last week. What happened? And they said, well, we started a morphine drip from the palliative care team. They said she's got a brain tumor, so she might as well just get issued out. So I said, well, my skio could probably define a little better. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I go over to her house, and her skio says, morphine overdose, brain flukes, congestive heart failure, hyperthyroidism, leaky gut, all this stuff due to parasites. So I put invert morphine, and her 30 people praying around her on her deathbed see her all go, oh, phew, can I have a beer? She wakes up out of her coma and asks for a beer. So everybody stops praying and goes, we're all going into the basement. You take care of her for another hour. The family leaves the room, and I spent the next hour reversing congestive heart failure, Graves' disease, brain fluke, deafness, diabetes. I mean, I just went to town on her. I figured I got nothing to lose. I threw the whole dictionary at her. And the next morning, she's sitting up in bed having breakfast as if nothing ever happened. She lived for 22 months, went on a honeymoon, and had a wonderful life until she came back to the same palliative care doctor who basically killed her with a bladder infection and put the catheter in the wrong hole, and she died of a septic bladder infection. So I was extremely mad. But also, the same palliative care doctor complained to the College of Physicians and Surgeons that he does not want to collaborate with me, thinking that I'm a natural doctor, doesn't realize I got more degrees than a stack of books. So that led on to this 23 committee, 10-year trial against me to strip me of my medical license for incapacitation, incompetence, every single thing that they could think of to throw the book at me to stop doing biofeedback. So I took a note from Bill Nelson's playbook where he basically took a documentary film of what was being done to him. And I happened to be filming this woman. I had a 44-hour documentary film footage on her. So when I went to my trial, I said, you're suspending me, but I saved her life. Here's her 44 hours of life after she was given a morphine overdose. What's your problem? And they said, we don't want you treating parasites. Shh. We don't want you treating autism. Shh. We don't want you doing these things that will reduce the prescription rate. Now, at this time, I said, I think you guys are crazy, and if you want, you can audit me again for the 10th time, and I'll show you that I'm right. And I put the skio aside, and I used the laboratory, and I said, well, I just happened to be in a group of a neighborhood where everybody kept coming from other countries to Toronto, and many of them had white stripes on their fingernails indicating zinc deficiency of pinworms or roundworms or parasites. So I picked everybody who walked in my whole walk-in clinic with white nails. I said, you're in my study. You're in my study. And I picked 305 people, of which I found 154 people with parasites just from the lab, from the OHIP lab, presented it to the College of Physicians, and they said, we don't believe you. I said, I used your lab. I didn't use biofeedback. So I said, you want me to stop treating 150 cases of parasites and let them go home and infect their kids and their neighbors and their lovers? You want me to create a public health epidemic of not treating parasites? And as it turned out, I'll shut the story down because it goes on and on, right? But to make a long story short, I found out that the parasite pills that you buy for 25 cents from Haiti for Vermox to deworm you were brought to Canada and packaged for $3 a pill. But if you sold the package of the $3 pill back to countries outside of Canada, you could charge an extra $6 for a pill for being humanitarian tax credit. So they buy the pill for 25, package it for 3, and sell it back for 9, and they're making hundreds of millions of dollars on selling the deworming pills outside of Canada. But here's me with all these degrees in parasitology, and I can't even give you a deworming pill? What's wrong with this picture? Right? Totally unfair. Totally ridiculous. Not to mention the fact that I found out that worms steal dopamine. Autism is low or disturbed dopamine. Measles vaccine is a dopamine blocker. So once they realized that if I deworm everybody, they wouldn't have autism, they came down on me like a motherlode ship. And they shut me down. They stripped me of my medical license without a trial. They put in a fake trial. I was suspended for 10 months without pay. I lost my spouse who went mad. I had people following me in black vans. I was completely out of money, living on a can of tuna. I had nothing, zero, stripped to zero. And then my spirit, the core, as we saw this morning, the core spirit was stripped of the material and stripped of the social and stripped of that mindfulness of your degrees mean nothing, came back to the spiritual center of what really is the truth here. Because I can rely on the truth. I can't rely on all this bogus stuff. So I went back and I went to the College of Physicians and Surgeons and I said, 29 doctors want to sue you for not having complementary medicine in Canada, and none of them have as much evidence as I do. So then I walked in, a reporter came and told me, 29 other doctors cannot get this done. You're the only one who has the evidence. So a Supreme Court lawyer came to me and he said, this is the phrase of the Charter of Rights that you must use. And I walked back into court. I fired my lawyer. I said she gave me a letter yesterday that says she's only allowed to represent the profession, not the individual. So during my trial, I took on my own defense. And I just basically reamed them up and down until they had their heads bowed, till they were writing what I was saying down. And finally, I embarrassed them into shame and said, you know, I've discovered that there's a 10-year jail sentence for each lawyer who participates in racketeering. And I discovered that there's no statute of limitations on racketeering charges. So you've taken 5 years to kill my profession. I think I'll take 5 years to kill yours. I'm coming back for you. I'm going to get this documentary film made, and I'm going to rip your pants down and make you the most disgusting public humiliation on the front page of every newspaper if you don't start a complementary medicine policy within 48 hours. Clock starts now. And I was secretly recording the whole trial on my cell phone. I walked out of the trial, I went over to the roller coasters at the CNA, and my phone flipped out of my pocket on the highest roller coaster, and I lost the transcripts. God was saying, it's behind you, don't go there again. So I walked back, and the next day I get a call from the college. We're starting the Complementary Alternative Medicine CAM policy of Canada. And 3 days later, they dropped the charges to the 29 other doctors of natural medicine. And once I had that accomplished, I snuck down to the membership office of the College of Physicians and Surgeons, where nobody really knew me, and I resigned my medical license. The next day, they asked me to unresign so they could recharge me. I said, would you mind putting that in writing? And they sent me a 17-page document full of racketeering charges that I must resign in every country of the world and never reapply for medicine ever again in any jurisdiction which is outside the jurisdiction of the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. So I said, thank you, I now have the evidence for racketeering. And now they really got scared. And suddenly, every phone call stopped. All the vans following me stopped. The men in trench coats in my backyard disappeared. Everything stopped because I scared the living heck out of them. I'd like you to know that now I walked across the street and retrained as a natural doctor in Ayurvedic medicine, TCM, and in osteopathy. And I got a natural medicine degree called integrative medical doctor, and that's what I work under now. So I had to cut off my life in half, and the SCIO was the pivotal technology that brought so much truth to me that I could no longer continue that bogus life in a bogus career with bogus outcomes, and I couldn't do it anymore. And as soon as I turned around away from that, all of a sudden I started getting my health back, my stress down, my own physical abilities to help people to become a humanitarian, to reach out and to be more free again. So you're seeing me back with my humor back and my health back after about 10 years of, nastiness. But really, the skio has pulled me through and has pulled so many through that I can't thank that industry enough for that. So now I teach integrative medicine at the Canadian College of Humanitarian Medicine, and I put a skio course together to teach advanced navigation and skill sets for people. I've graduated 5 years of students, and you can get an integrated health coach degree, an integrated practitioner degree, an integrated medical degree, or an integrated PhD. So I now try, and I've just spent the last 16 weeks learning how to run webcasts and broadcast webinars so that I wouldn't get so tired running around the world to too many countries, but allow myself to build a new cyber education system. So you'll be seeing more of that from me as the coming weeks, and as I start to learn how to broadcast, I'll be putting an archive down there so you guys can keep getting education from wherever you're at. I started a website called Best Triage for Bioenergetic Sensing Technology on how to teach people how to triage equipment. And you can see that since I started, and look at the outside there, how many pieces of incredible equipment have been developed, right? We're just in our infancy in bioenergetic medicine. And it's a safe industry. It's thorough, it's effective, it's efficacious, it's portable, it's got everything that medicine doesn't. So there's no way that we're going away. There's no way that we are going to be taken down again, because now we know how to work through the politics. And that's important that you realize that when I talk today, I haven't just said to you a few things lightly. I'm saying them to you deeply and harshly. These are the words you must use and no other words. This is how you must present yourself in no other way. This is how you stay safe in a box and how you can talk about physiology and anatomy, which is not illegal. It's when you put an attached label to it. So if I measure your blood pressure and it's high, that's called high reading on your blood pressure. But a doctor who then says you've got end organ damage from that high blood pressure gives you a diagnosis called hypertension. Well, you know what? In the skio world, we never see diagnoses because we already fixed them. So we never use those labels. So what I want you to learn about is talking about your vital signs, called your Verhop score. It's not illegal to talk about your volts, your amps, your resistance, your hydration, or your oxygen. That's not illegal to anybody in the world. So let's go on to the next slide here. I want to make a disclaimer so that you understand the language with which we must talk about, okay? Biofeedback, or quantum biofeedback, is an audio-visual biofeedback entrainment, wellness, and vitality system. Do you hear the word diagnose in there? No. It's not a medical device, although it has been used medically in hospitals because it is so powerful for restoring vitality and wellness. It's designed for self-care, which is the only thing that you are legally allowed to do, is to care for yourself without any questions of anybody. And you can use it at home or in clinic. And it does require some standard navigation training provided by the manufacturer by way of their program user manuals, their protocols, their templates, their videos, their resources, online or website or webinars. So this is a tool that you need to learn how to use. Just like a scalpel could be used to carve sculptures in clay, or it can be used to cut out your liver. You have to learn what the scope of practice is of your tool. No claims are made or ever shall come out of your mouth, meaning that the words that you say, you have XYZ. No, you don't have XYZ. Your body stress indicators show. When you say the word you have, you're diagnosing. So you say your body's stress indicators indicate. Your body shows these parameters. And we are not about diagnosis, or we don't make expected outcomes or medicinal cures or amelioration of any condition or disease, but rather simply quantum biofeedback entrainment helps the body to remember its normal mechanisms, which are stimulated to do what they were always intended to do. As Adam said, our machine doesn't heal the body. We stimulate your body to heal itself. That's the legal position that is totally defensible in every court of the world. There are no claims of outcome on therapy made or intended, nor any specific or singular protocol can or should address any specific disease, state, or pre-existing condition. Rather, the goal is to promote homeostasis, the word that is going to come out of your mouth 100 times now, and vitality reserves towards optimal oxygen, microcirculation for the best form and function of your body. So, is it illegal to say I'm helping your oxygen? No. The American Cancer Society slogan this year is what? Oxygen cures cancer. Okay? So if we stimulate oxygen, oxygen helps your body do all of these processes. If we stimulate detox to improve oxygen, we're helping the entire body. So do you really need to go into a disease model of a narrow-minded organ by organ specific, or any one bug at a time when you know that every day on the skio the bugs keep changing when you change the pH? You don't really have food poisoning because tomorrow you have a different bug because we're moving across a field. So in general, biofeedback is the perfect setting in the middle of all of it. You don't have to diagnose, but you can train almost every condition in the whole planet. You don't have to have any side effects because there are none, because you're only stimulating the body back to its natural levels. So where's the downside? The only downside is too much information, because the skio has the whole world all in one view, and it's kind of hard to figure out where to focus. So I'd like to show you where I focus every time in every person, because I always know that science is measurable. If I go after the measurable results, I'll always get measurable improvements. So let's go on to the next slide. I want to mention that the expanding applications of quantum biofeedback have been used for decades and have been proven efficacious and have been certified safe in many countries of the world. We aren't back where we were in 2001, where we were just tippy-toeing around the kitchen trying to explain this crazy technology. We are actually accepted, in countries that do bioenergetic medicine for real. Israel perhaps is one of the big leaders in this, and Europe, etc. Ultimately, the body mends itself, and a device does not mend you, but assist the body in its natural healing processes of self-healing, restoration, regeneration. But the caution is always to the end user to use at your own risk, at your own tolerance, and at your own time. And the only problem I find most of us make is we go so hard at it we don't rest in between to let the jello sit in the fridge. We have to do a bit of a cleaning and let the body take a few hours or days to get used to that new pattern, and climb up the mountain and grab onto one base camp and then the next base camp and work your way up the mountain in layers. Next. So let's talk about how to tune up the body. Let's talk about the fundamental biofeedback that you've been given, called the Verhoeven score, as the critical understanding of how the body electric works. And basically, if you look at the center, this is a laser pointer. At the center of the universe is this thing called 0-point energy, right? 0-point energy is where all things come to zero and therefore can be explosive in the ability to go in any direction, in a scalar direction, give, like a pyramid does, the scalar wave energy that gives you unlimited resources to direct at your will. And where does that come into the skio? Intention. Whatever your intention is what the 0-point energy will follow. A friend of mine accidentally dropped her box, broke it, and still kept going on a session as if she didn't want to tell the client. But her intention was so darn strong that she healed the person with her intention only with her box off. It was a real lesson for me that if you're in a good mood when you're doing your skio, your intention is even more powerful than the skio. And if you're in a terrible mood, in a blaming mood, in a hostile mood, in a hungry mood, you're going to imprint your clients too. So it's important for us to be as healthy as we can be if we're going to be the models of giving this information forward. Now, virtual reality of the skio is really stimulating the brain and body functions in real time with mathematical algorithms that map, navigate, and recenter the body with gyroscopic precision. Remember, Bill Nelson was a gyroscope operator on the Apollo 13, right? When the Apollo 13 couldn't fly to the moon and they blew up, they called the Jet Propulsion Lab. They got Bill Nelson, who was a 17-year-old math whiz, on his slide rule and said, can you get the coordinates for landing? We have to reprogram 18 months of gyroscopic planning to get the space shuttle back. And the two other engineers that night were supposedly off with food poisoning. So the general took Bill Nelson's coordinates and landed that Apollo 13 closest to the mothership of any landing so far in history, I'm told. Now, what did he do there? A gyroscope is to keep this aircraft going through space, keeping it on an X, a Y, and a Z axis so it stays in the center. So Bill Nelson's son was born with autism, and he says, well, can't I recenter my son with an X, Y, and a Z axis and get my son back on his axle? So this is where the skio was born, by developing, instead of a binary computer of zeros and ones, Bill Nelson knew that a trinary computer with an X, Y, and a Z axis is more accurate because it gives you a three-dimensional picture of where the person is. You can see the holes in the electrical field. Much like a flat chest X-ray can only show you two-dimensional of the chest, but a CAT scan can show you what's forward or back or a hole in the back or somewhere. So by using the quantum biofeedback, we can now get the exact clues as to where and to what and exactly how to balance the body again, and to do it with exquisite vortex instrument that promotes self-healing by mirroring the body. And if I put up a mirror to myself, the mirror of one set of reflection is reflected underneath. So if I fix the mirror image, so should this fix. So as we fix the mirror image of someone on our skio, their actual physical body does start changing its electrical field. And it does start correcting itself and learning to get back to its 0-point energy. Next. So if we look at our body now, we have to walk through this environment, this challenging environment. You know, since I started medical school, there was 500 drugs in the textbook. Now there's 2,500. When I started in medical school, autoimmune diseases was 1 in 20,000. Now it's 1 in 8. When we started in the 1950s, the baby boom generation led to 20,000 chemicals being released since the 1950s that weren't around when our parents were children. So our environment has changed, and we have to change our bioresonance vibrations to keep our mind, body, and spirit in balance. And the three-dimensional ability of the skio to give us back the form, the cupcake paper upon which we can pour our batter in, allows us to keep that form and function better, and these subtle energies are tremendously impactful. You don't have to use a sledgehammer of a doctor. I'll cut it out. I'll burn it out. I'll radiate you, vaccinate you, medicate you. These are hammers when we realize that a whisper is all that's needed. So if we take the full body training and the mapping of biofeedback and we break the body down with what I call pixelation, the body can be a 3D hologram with trivector fingerprints forming a field of oscillations that are in fine detail, in nanobytes, at nanospeeds, with nano% probabilities. So now I know exactly where you stand with accuracy to mirror the total body. Now, isn't it pretty easy? If I did a speech once and I showed an audience about this, and the lady in the front row goes, I guess I'm out of a job as a hypnotherapist. Because she couldn't see that this would be a better map for her to hypnotize them on instead of just stabbing in the dark. Next. Resonance can be tuned. So on a guitar, when you have a 12-string guitar, it has 6 strings, a yin and yang pair: wood, fire, earth, air, water, ether. Each one of those yin and yang organs, yin is in and yang is out. Do you know that? The yang organs are all the hollow exit organs. So when food comes into an organ, we process it, and then we release out the hollow yang part, the negative discharge that comes out of there, okay? So for every organ, if we balance the yin and yang of all the strings on your 12-string guitar, you sound great no matter what kind of music you play, because all the strings are already in tune to start with. But if one of those yin-yang pairs is out of balance, or sharp and inflamed, or flat and degenerative, that guitar could sound lousy, and no matter what song you play, if the strings are out of tune, it doesn't sound so great, right? You with me? So if we can take the volts, the amps, and the resistance like a little tuning fork and tune up each string in your organ systems, then the whole orchestra will play together in a more synergistic and harmonious concert, which will bring you more to the center of yourself, for which you may stay in the middle of the road better instead of flying into the ditch on the extremes, right? So our goal today is to show you how important it is to get the 3 vectors of the volts equals amps times resistance. This is the Ohm equation of electricity. I want to see how well your organ cushion is. Is it a tiny little out-of-tune guitar, or is it a big brass band? Do you have the energy through your electromagnetic fingerprints to have concordant vibrations that help your brain and body communicate with each other? And do you have the capacity through the skio to sort out the unconscious reactions, to corroborate where you're out of sorts? And as we learned this morning, 10% of our brain is conscious and talking, the commander, and it gives all the instructions to the unconscious brain to execute those commands. Well, if we can talk to instead of the general, if we could talk to all the soldiers down below and see what they're screaming about, we'd have a better understanding of how to lead them. Next. So, The slides? Sure, if you'd like. I have them all on a memory stick here, and I put the textbook of how the day that I got suspended, I went to Budapest and sat for 3 weeks and wrote everything I knew before I got suspended into one book. That book is on a memory stick. There's 25 copies of it at the desk if you want to buy it. It has these protocols in it and these slides if you wish, and we can make these things available to you, okay? Well, we won't talk about that on stage, okay? So we're talking about the integration of stress medicine. And if you are a biofeedback practitioner, the law states you have 4 things you're allowed to treat. Do you know what they are? I say treat, sorry, train. Stress, pain, relaxation, peak performance. How do you argue with any of those? Because it covers all of medicine, all of psychiatry, all of dentistry, all of sports medicine. Why would you ever want to say to anybody anything other than that and get yourself in trouble? So your job is to figure out if the Verhop score is stressed, in pain, needs relaxation or peak performance, and that's all you're hired to do if you're a therapist. And these abilities to get ourself back can include metabolism, nutrition, microbes, metals, toxins, homotoxicology, DNA, anti-aging. It doesn't matter which one you're using, it's all modifiable. If I push electrons in, they change the shape of you, they change the emotion of you, they change the structure of you. So we're changing people's structure back to factory reset. We're making it like you were in a perfect womb. Next.
I want to go back to the womb.
Okay, well, we'll sign you up next, okay?
The rest of my life trying to get back in.
The fundamental transformation that we all have to do, though, is to balance ourselves. And as we saw this morning, you can have entities in your field that you've picked up from external issues, internal ghosts, worries, stresses that you've carried as secrets through your life. You can also realize that the body's alignment and physical nature has to carry that. So if you have great mental abilities, but your body and spine are all corroded and you have leaky gut and MS and your nerves are frayed, how can you really live your fundamental best life? So my goal isn't just to treat you a little bit. My goal is to really treat the whole enchilada. I want your whole body pulled together in symbiotic ways. And in order to do that, we use a biofeedback loop to retrain and put the training wheels back on your bike and say, I know you're feeling a little wobbly when you first start riding this bike, left to right, front to back, but as we keep training, you get more solid on the training wheels, and eventually you don't need the training wheels and you're riding your life again without necessarily having to have so much support. So homeostasis is the word that you guys need to talk about all the time with your clients. I'm not treating you, I'm encouraging your body to come back to its thermostatic general homeostasis steady state. And if you can do that with programs that are personalized, then every single person you meet is going to have a different program. But the theme of it, of treating their Verhop score to reduce pain, stress, improve relaxation, and peak performance is all you're doing. It doesn't matter if they say I've got autism or cancer. You say that doesn't matter to me because all of it is modifiable and temporary. Everybody comes to you. I know you're always sick of hearing it. Does this treat that? Does it treat that? Can I use it for my cousin? Have I got diabetes? And I say, every single thing is modifiable if you look at the root cause. So I'd like to show you how this SCIO device can be used as a dissection tool to look for the root causes. Next. When you take energy in the world, it's a huge whirling, swirling dervish of energies that our body has to suck into it to produce the air, fire, water, earth signs that make our body do a relay race and hand off electrons in an energetic pattern. In Ayurvedic medicine, that's called Vata for the air sign, fire, or Pitta for the metabolism of anabolism, and then catabolism where we burn off things with the Kapha. These different personality types are well described, and I won't go into it in detail here, but the SCIO is designed to reestablish each one of these like a string on a guitar in its balance so that then the whole system works well. Next. So if we follow the metabolic rules, if we follow the seasons, if we follow circadian rhythm, if we follow the organs, we really reassert this life pattern. And that's why you'll find that when we look at the elements of external or internal, this is how we need to think about it. Which of these areas is so struggling that the body can't handle the relay race and the baton around the body? The thing that I learned most in Chinese medicine was that as a doctor, I kept going for the one thing that was broken and thinking that I had to medicate or operate or fix the one thing that was broken, but it's the one before it. In Chinese medicine, the stage before the broken one is where the problem is. So we have to learn to work backwards as to where they're broken, and the broken area is only overworking to compensate for the one before that was already struggling. So we need to really not just isolate people and work on one part of their body, but the integration of the body. Are you following me? Next. So what are you made of? Earth, air, fire, water. Where do you feel good? At the beach, right? Because you have the sand to ground you, you have the air to flush your oxygen, and you feel like you're alive at that interface. And that's what I want you to recreate in the skio, to put back the shoreline in people. Next. You are a fish tank. And what are the three components of a fish tank? Water, salt, and an oxygen bubbler to move around the water. So that's what the skio does. It puts back your volts, amps, and resistance to make your aquarium clean again. And the amp coil, or the skio, is the snail on the aquarium to clean your tank. And if you look at this, go ahead to the next one. If you really want to think about the Verhop score, I want you to think about a light bulb. It has to have three components. First of all, it has to have power, which is the voltage that plugs into the wall. And in your case, in humans, the voltage is your adrenal glands and your catecholamines. Dopamine, adrenaline, thyroxine. These are the power supply to your body. So that's the electrons coming in. Next, you have to have the amperage of the body, which is the ability, like the tungsten wire, to hold the capacity of the bulb in brightness. The more your amperage, the brighter your bulb. The less your amperage in serotonin and lymph and vitality and immune, the more dull your bulb. So the amperage is really how bright you are, how happy is your mood. And then we have the tungsten wire, which is the minerals that grab onto electricity. So if you have no minerals in your body, no matter how much I pump in electricity into you, there's no patio stones for it to land on and stick. So you have to have those three components: power, amperage, and resistance, to have an organ cushion or a light bulb that will turn on for a nice bright life. Okay? Now we can look at these things called the hydration on the x-axis. I'm going to go into detail on this for another 10 minutes so that I'm slowing you way down until you really get this. We're going to have minerals for conductivity, and the oxygen or amperage helps with your pH. And when you put those all together, it's called the bioterrain of your body. And the bioterrain is really the petri dish. Sure. Move that back a bit. So the body creates what? Our body actually has to create 200 watts of power per day in order to live. So the purpose of the Verhop score is to see how much wattage you can create, and are you exhausted and fatigued with no power, or do you have enough energy to live? And we have to notice that there's other feature here. Minus 240 millivolts, no bugs can grow in you. That's the frequency of wheatgrass juice. So the amp coil pours in the negative charge. See the negative in front there? Negative charge means an electron. So skio is pouring in electrons into your body and filling up your organ cushion and allowing those electrons to fill all the rust spots in your body and give you back the accelerated push towards normalcy for where you were missing or bald in all these electrical fields. So it's important that you realize that if you get this right, you get everything else right. Because the body has 300 billion years of genetic engineering on how to clean itself if it just had the right raw materials and was just unblocked. Does that make sense? Next. Now, the periodic table of elements is the basis of all life, and the basis of the skio is to give you back the minerals that create your resistance and give you the minerals that create enzymes and the structure and function of your body. And if you look at this diagram, the biological elements on the table are, not every element on the table is good for humans. Some of them are really, really important for biological relevance. But if you I just want to make sure you guys understand. See this section in the middle called the bridge? Vanadium, chromium, manganese, iron, cobalt, nickel, copper, and zinc. These are the bridges, like the patio stones that carry oxygen back and forth between either side of this. So you have to have these fundamental vitamins or minerals, shall we say, in order to run your body. But guess what? Every other bug in the world needs those same minerals if they use oxygen. So if you've got a tapeworm is going to eat vanadium, chromium, and all this, and you're going to basically be taking vitamins till the cows come home because you keep feeding your enemy. So I want to show you how to clean the dance wax and strip it first. Then you repolish the floor. You don't want to feed all the vitamins and nutrition to the enemies on their deathbed and make them live longer. You want to change the pH of the petri dish so they don't even live in you. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. If you took that last chart and I showed you the proportions in the body, this is a staggering number. Look at this. These 6 or 7 elements here, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chloride, and magnesium, make up a huge, huge chunk of the entire body. And oxygen is 65% of your body. So if you don't have those carrying minerals to carry oxygen, you're going to drop your oxygen, and what grows in an oxygen-deprived body is cancer in an acid body with no oxygen. So really, do we have to do the whole periodic table of elements? Well, no, but if you miss these top ones here, 65% oxygen, 18% carbon and carbohydrates, 9% hydrogen, 3% is all it takes to make a body for all the proteins, neurotransmitters, and enzymes in your whole body. You only need 3% nitrogen. So why are we eating steaks that are 20 ounces when we only need a small amount? We have to get our dietary suggestions in here to make sure. And finally, let me say that, look at this, less than 1% of the rest of your whole body is made of minerals. When you're cremated, you have that little urn of a few minerals left on the mantelpiece, but the rest of all your spirit and water is gone. That's all that you're made of, and yet without these tiny minerals of copper, manganese, molybdenum, you can't run your thyroid, you can't run your spleen, you can't run your corpus callosum, you can't have left or right brain talk. If you don't have zinc in your body, it attaches 330 enzymes, hormones, and minerals to a zinc receptor. No zinc, you can't think. No zinc, you're not pink. No zinc, your skin's not like mink. No zinc, you cannot have shrinkage in the gut for weight loss. If you have no zinc, you're going to need a shrink because you're going to be psychotic. You can't attach your hormones, your dopamine. If you have no zinc, you can't make your bone marrow. If you have no zinc and vitamin C, you can't make adrenaline. And if you can't have zinc in the body, which makes the prostate and the ovaries, you have no winky-dink zinc. That's impotence, infertility, all these things, right? If you then have a pinworm that steals 10,000 zinc molecules every night of the full moon or new moon, and you drop your zinc by 10,000 that night, what's going to happen to you? You're going to be psychotic. You're going to be in a rage. You're going to be totally out of your mind. And that's all the school shootings in America I've looked at. I mapped them all on a calendar. They were all on the new moon or the full moon because the kids are shooting when they got pinworms. Wow. So it's important that you understand that if you're low on your Verhoeven score on resistance and minerals, you cannot get any work done because the minerals are the catalyst to enzymes. So if you start your Verhoeven score and you got low minerals, you better start looking hard at where you lost the minerals or the leaky gut that prevented you from absorbing the minerals or the big tapeworm in your pancreas that's eating all your minerals. But those minerals, once low on your Verhoeven score, will deplete you and they will stall the rest of your whole session. You won't be able to get the work done because there's no enzymes in the factory to get the work done. Next. So I want to bring you back to this picture in your mind that we are a three-dimensional body called an organ cushion. And it's made of voltage called hydrogen up and down mixing with oxygen to make water. So your aquarium has to have a half a tank of water. If you're dry on the water, you're going to get acid, you're going to get reduced. If you're too heavy on the water, you'll get congestive heart failure and you'll be soggy. So you need a proper amount of water to fill your tank, okay? That's called the voltage. And this predicts the catecholamines called adrenaline that regulate how much you urinate through the kidneys and your pituitary adrenal axis. So this is really a feature of how much adrenaline and how much adrenal stress you have. Does that make sense? Can I hear a yeah? Yes. Okay. Number 2, we have to have the amperage on the light bulb. The amperage is this pH, which right down the center of the oxygen curve is where hemoglobin dissociates from oxygen. So if your body is at the right pH, you carry a lot of oxygen represented by this red circle in the middle. If your oxygen is high, it keeps you in the center of your bioterrain, and you don't tend to flip into the ditch off the center of off the road. You're flying up the middle. If you go acidic on the pH, the acid should be in the gut as the yang organs to allow the acids out of you. And if you end up being too alkaline in your gut, growing yeast and fungus in there, you actually retain all the poisons and turn into parasites, pesticides, diseases, heart disease, cancer, because your body cannot drain out its yang organs anymore. So the purpose of me showing you this is the last thing is the resistance. How many minerals are in your walls? If you're paper thin in minerals, I could punch a hole through you easily. And a cancer is just a fluff the body makes to fill in a hole where the minerals are missing. So what is cancer? It's a defense of the body. Why should we then cut out your cancerous tumor, radiate it or medicate it, and make a bigger hole there? We should be looking for the tapeworm that ate all the minerals up in that area that created the hole that made you want to fill it with fluff. So the resistance is how deep you are in your walls and how hard it is to punch through you. And if you don't have vitamin D in the body, you can't absorb the minerals. And the University of Calgary just showed that vitamin D has now been found not just in the myelin sheath of your nerves or your skin. They found it in every cell of the entire body as a hormone called ergosterol, the precursor to cholesterol. Cholesterol is the precursor to DHEA stress hormone. DHEA stress hormone splits into 2 camps. If you're stressed, it goes into cortisol and estrone, causing fat. If you're sexy, it goes into progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen for the heart. So once you have cholesterol, it has 2 choices, stress or sex. Mutually exclusive. You either run from the tiger or you run into bed, but you can't do both at the same time. So next, let's look at if you moved upwards and you got oxidized with metals at the top of this list or pesticides, you'd move up into the upper quadrants and get sick. If you moved with pesticides and funguses and diseases over to the other side, you'd get sick. If you lost all your minerals and you became super acidotic, you'd go into renal failure or diabetic failure, you'd fall down out of there. And if you moved this way, back to probiotics, a nice, healthy gut, you would actually prevent all of the illnesses in the world. So do you want to keep on chasing illnesses over here, or should you just start working towards restoring the health? And when you put enough good moss down on your guts, the crabgrass will be pushed away by proportion. Okay? Now, us doctors, myself included, have given antibiotics in walk-in clinics for strep throat. And for every 1 week of antibiotics, we knock out 18 months of probiotics. So can you imagine why the autism rate shows up at the 18th month of your life? It's because we gave all those kids all these antibiotics before they were 18 months old and all these vaccines, and now they have no normal flora left, so they're going to distort their dopamine, their amperage, and their resistance, and that's described as autism spectrum. Let's go on. So you are a Rubik's Cube, and your total sole goal using the skio is to get that back in its center. And if somebody had a trauma to swivel you around and you got the wrong bugs in the wrong compartment, you got the wrong lineup here, the skio says you need to rotate that around back here, force it by training wheels to come back to a more perfect balance of voltage, amps, and resistance. That's all you're doing with the skio. That's all you're doing is retraining them back to perfect bioterrain. It doesn't matter if it's emotional that swiveled them, spiritual, physical, lead poisoning, whatever. It's always mappable because every single thing in the world has a different frequency or fingerprint. And we saw that we can actually look down to the details of even your past life, your emotions from trauma in childhood. You can really look deep and detailed. Next. So the 5 elements are designed to keep this body in health by rotating a relay race by handing off electrons. The heart makes the fire. It gives the food over to the gut. We breathe off the gases from the zinc in our lungs, which release bicarbonate through gases in our colon and our lung. We urinate out the excess waters or retain waters if we need to, and then our wood element, the liver, burns off these energies, and we try to have this relay race going around and around through our lives in this order. I believe that most people have absolutely screwed up badly because they do coffee first, fire. Oh, I'm not going to eat breakfast. I'll skip the earth. I'll go from fire right over to breathing a coffee and a cigarette. Now I'm going to take my metals, and now I don't have any bicarb, so my liver is working harder. So now my liver's got to get rid of all these poisons, so it doesn't have enough time to absorb food. So now I'm going to actually just eat junk food, and then I have to use other things to dilute all the poisons in me, so I'm going to drink alcohol. I mean, people are using this internal, what's called the cycle of destruction, more than you realize. So it's important for you to teach your clients. The fire sign, well, I start at the wood. The wood is cleaning through the night. The fire is in the morning. The earth is for your breakfast. The metals is for the late afternoon. The water in the afternoon. You have to sort of look at the circadian rhythm on a Chinese clock to get back in sync. Next. Now let's look at that bioterrain graph in more detail for a second. If you're reduced, meaning full of hydrogen, and you have an acidic gut, then the hole in your donut is negative charge in the gut and 7.4 in the blood. So the blood is a more positive charge than the gut. So all the negative poisons will leave the body in this state. So this kind of person never gets sick. They release all their negative poisons all the time. If you start getting oxidized with metals, you start getting moldy. This is where penicillin and mold grows. So as you start getting oxidized, meaning something is stealing your oxygen-carrying minerals, the molds eat all your magnesium, manganese, molybdenum, your salts and such. So as these molds steal your minerals, you start floating up into this oxidized state. Now these white bars here between them are called magnesium fences. Magnesium runs 200 functions in your body, and if you have a yeast infection sucking all the magnesium out of you to make this yeast colony grow its tubes, then you lose your fences and suddenly you start breaking through into other fields. So now the seeds from this field spill over to this one, where we have viruses at the top, worms, funguses, tapeworms, H. pylori, lymphoma cancer. You're full of metals. It takes about 7 to 12 fillings in your mouth to come up into this area. And then when you finally hit this sort of this lateral, what I call the cliff, between quadrant 3 and 4 here, this is where blood clots and sticky blood and rouleau formation and poor circulation and oxygen start really getting serious and drops you over the cliff down into where doctors take care of you in this blue zone called the MD, takes care of you only once you've been diagnosed. So you've already fallen off the cliff here, and that's when you've got the clots, the strokes, the high blood pressure, the heart disease, and the cancer in this range. Doctors, by law, may not treat you until you fall into this role. They cannot treat you preventatively. They can only treat you once your blood test is already rotten. So all our doctors are stuck down here by law, saying we're not allowed to prevent the worms up here. We're not allowed to prevent your molds. This is why our healthcare system is broken. We're spending too much money down in this quadrant and not enough here in these other areas to reverse age. Next. So what does the quantum biofeedback do to fix this? Well, it's got nano speeds, so it doesn't take 15,000 tubes of blood in 4 weeks and a bunch of, periscopes up your orifices to find out what's going on with you. It has a trivector analysis of Fourier analysis, which means voltage squared times amperage squared times resistance squared gave a unique fingerprint that Dr. Nelson calls your matrix number. A unique fingerprint. Then we have bioenergetic vital signs called the Verhoeven scores to give you some idea of where you are on the road. How good is your organ cushion? Big, bad, little, skinny, overwhelmingly, or wonderful? Has anybody ever seen a normal scan on anybody? 100% on everything? First time ever? Never. Nobody in the whole world is perfect. And then we have a matrix map that says, so what isn't perfect? Well, let's look at it in a probability matrix and say, out of 10,000 items, these ones are screaming, and these ones are so exhausted they can't even scream at all. The extreme of the bell curve. Then we have these sub-sorting tools, which I want to go back through in a minute and make sure you guys know how to use the sorting tools in the SKIO to have a better understanding of what's really going on with these clients. And then we have the Bioterrain resolution, where we can give therapies, over 800 modules within the SKIO to give you back what you need. And if we now work into the Quest 9 where we've got the speed up on the, I mean, I know that I love the Skio, but it's a little slow for me. But now we've got this ripping speed Quest 9 where we're getting instantaneous answers. You can't beat it. Next. So when we have the two-way zeroid process, I want to make sure you guys understand how unique the Quest 9 is. It takes a measurement from you, it sends back a correction, and then it remeasures you in milliseconds and says, did you get enough vitamin C or do you still need more? So the zeroid loop was its breakthrough of its time from Professor Nelson, who actually was the first to make that zeroid loop and has the patent on it. So it means that we can't overdose you. We can't just keep bombing you. The computer will downregulate itself until you hit 0, and then once you hit 0, the computer moves on to the next thing. So that's the safety in this technology. The probability ranking, the cross-testing, the multi-channel ability. When I first met up with the Phase X, it was 50-channel mixer. Then the Skio was 100-channel mixer. Then the Adductor was 120 channels, wasn't it? And eventually now we have the ability to look at your body 100 times on serial or parallel ports at the same time. You can't have 100 doctors give you opinion at the same time. And so let's go on one more. So I want to talk with you about the Verhoeven score, because if I never saw a matrix, I could tell you exactly what's wrong with you now after seeing 20,000 of these to tell you what's wrong with you, as long as I knew which one of these things was out of whack. Let's go on to the next slide. The voltage is your adrenal power. If you've lost your adrenals, you've lost everything. You can't regulate oxygen, you can't regulate function, you can't regulate energy, you can't regulate blood sugar. So if you are wondering where in the world to start with a Quest 9, some doctors have said you should actually fix the adrenals before you do anything else in your whole session, because now you're going to actually have the accelerator to drive the car where you need to. The amperage is extremely, extremely predictive of the serotonin levels in your lymph nodes. So any person with a yeast infection which eats serotonin will have a low amperage. Any person with a fungal infection will have a low amperage. Anybody who's depressed or metal toxic in their lymph nodes will have a low amperage, and they will be depressed or dull or sad, and that's where we need to be aware of the ability of the mind. Even if the voltage is present, you can still be extremely lacking in drive because you're so chronically fatigued from illness or swollen glands. The resistance, as I mentioned, is the catalyst that turn on your enzymes. Without minerals, you're out of the game. But have you ever seen minerals on the Skio in a negative zone? Minus 22? Yeah. What does that mean? If your minerals are out of you, you should be dead, right? Because you would be the urn on the cremated urn. If you have no minerals in your body, you should be dead. But if you have a negative mineral, it might mean that something is sucking out of you the minerals. A spiritual entity, a heavy metal using up all your free minerals. So somebody who's got a negative mineral, I always do a spiritual cleanse first in case they have some other right-spinning entity around them. Living things spin to the left, dead things spin to the right. So on the Skio, a living thing has a positive charge, positive minerals. A dead thing has a negative charge. So if somebody has a ghost in the house or an entity or a parasite in them that's sucking them empty, you may sometimes see a negative resistance. And until you correct the heavy metals or the spiritual correction or the minerals in that person, you might as well be wasting your time on the Skio because you're not going to get anything done. They're just like a vortex sucking empty like a drain. The hydration is critical intracellularly, which is also reflected in your phase angle. If your cell is 60% hydrated, you're sort of a bit down. 70 or 80% hydrated, or 8 on a phase angle or more is ideal. If somebody's phase angle shrinks down to 6, then 5, then 4, then 3. When you have a phase angle of 3, that person is either cancerous or on their way out or dying or so dehydrated that they're very, very ill. So the sicker they are, the harder they fall. If these numbers all come in extremely low, you better be careful when you start with that client and build them up slowly so you don't crash them. Oxygen is intracellular on the Skio. It says the intracellular oxygen, not like a blood gas on your peripheral veins. So it's really a much more detailed indicator of how your mitochondria and DNA are bathing in good oxygen. The proton pressure is that y-axis of how much water and hydrogen, called hydride, is in you, versus the electron pressure is the pH. how much amperage do you have? If you have a perfect pH of 7.4 in your blood, then the proton pressure should be 74, the electron pressure should be 74, plus or minus 5 or 10. I'd say 5. What if you're way high in the protons and low in the electrons, then your gut is so alkaline you're growing yeast out your yin-yang. That's the most common thing I see is high proton pressure. But if you go the other way and your electrons are really high, you must have pus in the house. There must be an abscess, a severe infection. I rarely see it. Maybe 1 in 100 clients would have a high electron pressure. But when you see that, you should be wondering, does this person actually need a full antibiotic or a septic workup or a diabetic ketoacidosis? The ones with high electron pressure are the ones that could die because they have such acid in their body, they could create coronary artery spasm. So you'll never ignore a high electron pressure. It means pus in the house usually. Okay? Next. We also have the mean resident frequency pattern. What does that tell you? Well, a human should be 1,000 to 15,000 vibration on your happy day, right? If you're below 1,000, I'm slumped, I'm tired, I can't react, I have no energy reserves. So anybody who is suppressed with an entity, suppressed with a bug, suppressed with infection, suppressed with minerals, poisons, toxins, they will flatten out their mean resident frequency pattern and feel spiritually dead. If they have a spiritual attack on them, sometimes they have they're so disinhibited from lack of control systems that their vibration here could be 1,000,000. I had one of my friends go into an air shaft of a Canadian Parliament to see why all the men who worked there were going crazy, and she came out of there crazy. And I took a skio on her, and her mean resident frequency pattern was 14 million. She was spinning at the same speed as the fans in the shaft. So people who are low in resistance can pick up other vortexes around them. The speed should be up to speed, and if you're not up to speed, you're missing minerals, right? So if your resistance is low, your speed will be low, you'll get nothing done, and you'll be sitting like a therapist all day going, geez, this module's taking 3 minutes, it should be 3 seconds. So again, you come back to minerals first. If the speed is sluggish, they have no enzymes and no catalysts to get the job done. The phase angle I mentioned is how hydrated the cell is. If it's below 3, you're in deep water and you're probably looking at a cancer or a severe autoimmune condition or something serious. So pay attention. The reactance and impedance scores really are a reflection of how many minerals are in the house and how well you're able to react to things. And the cellular vitality index is an average of all the Verhoeven scores averaged together. So it's not a finite score, it's a mathematical average of how well are you on a scale of 1 to 10. So if you're at a 10 out of 10, great. 8 out of 10, fantastic. 6 out of 10, you got some work to do. 3 out of 10, you're a holy rolling mess. The phase angle is the hydration inside the cell. It's on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 would be perfect hydration cellularly. 6 would be I'm depleted. 3, my cell is shrunken. My cellular wall is broken open. I got leaky cells or leaky gut or something where things are not in the right compartments. And the temporal disturbance is one I find fascinating. If you look on your skio, you see that when you do your Verhoeven scores, it sometimes flashes temporal. Do you know what I'm talking about? The temporal disturbance is saying that I'm walking down the street with my timing, but something is clinging onto me that has a different timing, and so there's a schism in my brain to the human speed of 15,000 versus the speed of the tapeworm's brain, which is 15 million or whatever. So if there is a temporal disturbance, you can bet that there's one of those black blobs in their aura, on the aura scan. And until that temporal disturbance is gone, that person's going to act flaky, weird, not themselves, because in fact there's a twin there beside them, an evil twin, interfering with their personality. And have you ever noticed you've taken that spiritual entity off people and they look different? Next, the entire purpose of what I'm doing here is only one. I want to retrain you to have you retrain yourself. So if I use the nervous system as the main controller of the brain, and I fix the peripheral nervous system, the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, somatic nervous system, visceral nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric nervous system, I got my controls back. I am in control of my physiology again. So biofeedback is to entrain normal, biological, physiological, and nervous system control of your body so that you can open and close your arteries. A small opening in the artery increases oxygen. A clamping down on the artery causes stress. A small opening of dilated of your colon allows the bowel movement to come out, but a stricture of the bowel or a tapeworm or a big nest of roundworms in there would block that. So the purpose is to open or close muscles with SCIO. And you'll notice on the front page of the disclaimer it says, this is for muscle and nerve re-education. That's all you have to say. Okay? It's simple, but it's complex, but it's beautiful because if you fix the electrical system, the hormone system, the integration, this will take over because it's already been genetically designed to do so. We just have to unblock these areas and find out where the blockages are. Am I going too fast or are you okay? Okay, keep going. The idea of eutonia means that I'm sympathetic up and then I go to sleep and I'm sympathetic down. And then I eat and I relax, and I have sex and I run, and I have these abilities to do these behaviors with the ability that at the end of that behavior I should come back to my balance point. But people who are sick are not in eutonia. They usually have a sympathetic overdrive and a lack of parasympathetic underdrive. So they're constantly running around in stress. Instead of up the middle, they're always circling around like a spiral, running in circles because they can't get the straight line. Next. So I want you to come back and sort of think about this. The voltage, the amps, and the resistance are telling you how big is your organ cushion. If you're starting at 80%, you're already pretty good. But if you're starting at 30% on these numbers, you're in deep trouble. And you better pay according attention to not overthrowing an Olympic athlete detox stress protocol on a big, healthy, strapping, mineralized athlete. And then you come and do the same protocol on a little old lady with no minerals, no hydration, 10 drugs in her system and toxic. You might crash her if you go too hard and too fast. So I like to say that the minerals are critical to get the speed up. The adrenals are critical to get the hydration up. And the amperage almost always is disturbed as soon as you get a leaky gut, which grows over here where metals drive you up into oxidization. The yeast then are heavy metal scavengers. Yeast likes mercury and lead. So if you have mercury or lead poisoning, your yeast is there as the Red Cross trying to buffer it off of you. Now, if you go in there and blow up all the yeast in them, guess what? You're going to release all that mercury and lead into the system. So you have to be careful about working them back from quadrant 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 and sort of working them back towards normal. Next. The water hydration, the pH, the proton and electron pressure, okay, the electrons are running up and down this, and the protons are running here, okay? So if your protons are high, you got a big yeast infection over here. Memorize that. Protons high is a big yeast infection or metals way over on this side. And if the electrons are high, you probably got pus somewhere down here as an acidosis. So I really pay a lot of attention right off the bat to the electron and proton pressure, and it sort of gives me an idea where they live on this graph. Next. So remember, the voltage is the electron pressure pushing you up and down. Next slide. If the voltage is, I want you to memorize this little thing from chemistry. A lion roars, right? So memorize this word, Leo, grrr. Lose electrons means you're oxidized, so you're moving up on the graph. If you lose electrons to metals, poisons, diseases, you lose electrons, then you become oxidized, which pushes you into premature aging. It rusts your body. Okay? So, and just go back one step. The prediction of voltage here is when adrenaline is smacked with zinc, it breaks in half into oxygen and deoxyadrenaline. And deoxyadrenaline has a 7-hour half-life of stress in the body. So anytime you have a road rage and you yell out the window of some driver, for 7 hours after that, you're dealing with the byproducts of adrenaline and catecholamines running around in your body. So don't worry, be happy. Okay, so secondly, we'll go to the amperage. The amperage again is really the proton pressure of how many acid molecules can make hydrochloric acid in your stomach and keep you nice and juicy to digest your proteins, or whether you're becoming too alkaline and growing molds and yeast which grow at pH 7.5, 7.6, 7.8. Okay, only a few bugs grow over here. The rest of them can't even live outside of pH 8. So if you could just memorize these 3 bugs. What grows at pH 8? Anybody? Yeast, Mycoplasma pneumonia, some of those stranger bugs, and metals. So if something is really making you metallically poisoned or making you grow a lot of fungus, you're going to end up having a high alkaline gut. Next. So if you have high protons, your acid pH will be over here, and your acid pH will prevent you from having dry skin. Your skin is a negative charge, and your guts are a negative charge. Remember, I'm a donut. The hole in me should be negative, and the skin in me should be negative, but the flesh in me should be positive. The donut in me should be 7.4 pH, but the hole in the donut should be more negative charge, so the negative poisons will flow out the yang hollow organ. If you have low protons and an alkaline, then you have to look at the pancreas or the lungs or the kidney that regulate bicarbonate and say, I've got way too much bicarb. Is my kidney inflamed? Is my pancreas inflamed? Why am I having such a high pH in the body with a high yeast infection or something on this side? Next, the resistance is how deep is your walls, and if you basically are low in resistance, then you can punch a hole through you. Next slide. At the bottom here, we have nice thick minerals. As we move up with metal poisoning, we get less minerals. And when we get right up to the top with heavy metal poisoning, we have very little minerals left. And that's where you're finding people punching through in this corner called lymphoma and leukemia. They have no more ability to resist. So when you lose the grounding, you lose your enzymes, you lose your skeletal buffers, you lose your thyroid adrenals, you lose absorption. And by the way, what regulates the minerals is the thyroid, right? And the thyroid is in every other bug. If you got a tapeworm with a thyroid, the tapeworm is stealing all your thyroid minerals. So the doctor gives you a thyroid pill and he feeds the tapeworm. Now you got a pancreatic tapeworm and the doctor says you got diabetes, so they give you pork tapeworm insulin to feed the pork tapeworm in your pancreas, instead of taking out the tapeworm that's stealing your minerals and giving you back. And one thing I want to make sure you guys understand, a lot of people miss this. The thyroid regulates minerals, which are your tendons and ligaments. So every single person you see with arthritis, they lost all the sulfur in their joints because they're fighting at some other level on their thyroid. In fact, every person with a thyroid gets a frozen shoulder because they lost all the sulfur in their tendons and they start ripping everywhere. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention sulfur for a minute. Your joints are made of sulfur and silver. Your hair and skin are made of sulfur and silver. Your liver is made of glutathione sulfur. Your kidney is made of N-acetylcysteine sulfur. Why is sulfur so important? It kills every bug in the world. It's the natural antibiotic of your body. So if you run out of sulfur, your body grows more parasites. The parasites steal more minerals. The minerals lose enzyme control. The enzymes stop cleaning you, so the bug ends up setting up a colony around itself where it's nice and happy because nobody's defending against it. And then as that bug continues to eat the minerals in that organ, you're going to get a tumor in that organ, because there's dysfunction around where all the minerals were stolen, and we call that a hole in your organ. So what do? You get rid of the bugs in the organ by changing the pH. So if all the yeast grows here, and you change the pH of your body back to 7.4 or 6.5, there's no petri dish that can support that yeast anymore. So am I killing the yeast, or am I changing the pH? Which is better? Change the pH, and then the cupcake won't support that batter. Next. So Verhoep average score and cellular vitality index are basically telling you how close are you to the center of the circle. If your vitality index is 8 or 10 out of 10, the person's pretty good in their bioterrain. If their cellular vitality index is 6 or 5 or 4 or 3, one of these components must be corrupted. And often many of them are together. Next. So when you have a spin towards the right spin, you know how we have in the skio left spin or right spin? Life is left. Death is D or dextrose or right. So as you spin on this curve to the right, you're forcing your body into inflammation or degeneration side of the graph. So when you look on your body parameters and you see a right spin, you know that this person is in an inflammatory spin, and they're dropping and dropping towards these quadrant 3 and 4, and this is very predictive that they will get some sort of disorder or illness or condition. Next. If I just went up a little bit into the moldy side, I think maybe these two slides might have been reversed. If I just went up into the moldy side, I haven't crossed the fences, but if you go all the way over into quadrant 3, you're in trouble of risking. Next slide. If you go all the way past that critical cliff here between quadrant 3 and 4, you are absolutely destined to have a condition or a disease because your body has decompensated. The disease is your body's ability to try and buffer you during that stress. So the purpose of us trying to use the skio is to reverse this spin. Next slide. And we're trying to get the left spin back into you by reversing with biofeedback training, moving from quadrant 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, and forcing your body back towards pulling in the water, pulling in the minerals, pulling in the patio stones that carry the oxygen. That's all that skio is doing.
No. Number one, for everybody that is presently taking pictures of the slides, etc., as they go, you're more than welcome to do that. However, all of our PowerPoint presentations will be available for you, so you need not necessarily waste the space on your phone unless you like it that way, and that's fine. No worries. Number one. Number two, I see you're still in your PowerPoint.
I'm just about to finish, yeah.
You got 20 minutes to 30 at most.
Okay.
And so I know you want to get into the device, so I'm just kicking you down a little bit.
Good.
Okay.
But if you get...
One other thing, sorry. When this one's done, we are all going up to the roof, to the mountaintop. There's a helicopter pad. We're all going to get on the helicopter and... No. We're all going to get on the helicopter pad. The Vegas skyline's in the background. We're going to take a group shot. Cool? So before lunch, we're going up there. Excuse the interruption.
Pleasure. So our goal with skio is to reverse the Bioterrain back to a proper VeriHop score. That's all I'm asking you to do. I couldn't help it if all your diseases went into remission. Right? I say that to my clients. I couldn't help it if you went into remission. Don't blame me. Next. So biofeedback, the total goal of us is to get that oxygen up. The oxygen cannot go up unless there's minerals and water in the fish tank. So you have to take all three of these things together all the time. And you can't just get down one roadway and get distracted. Next. So hydration, if it's low, go to your nutrition page. Use your electrolytes. Use your hydration. Use your tissue salts. Find out where you're leaking in terms of the organs that regulate your minerals, such as the pituitary adrenal axis, the stomach, thyroid, the colon, kidney, any skin losses or addictions that are causing you to lose that hydration. For every 1 cup of coffee, which is 2 tequilas, you pee out 2 cups of urine. Right? So we have to look at where you're losing your water or where you're not drinking good water. Number 2, if the minerals are low, you have to eradicate the microbes that are stealing those minerals. Or you have to use a heavy metal cleanse to find out why those minerals are being sequestered or used up in improper ways. You can restore the minerals to the pituitary, endocrine, pancreas, and kidney, and these will allow your body to come back up to power. If your oxygen is low, you need to balance the pH and reduce the metals, microbes, and toxins that are shifting you off that center point of oxygen. So you can use the organ cleansing, the nutrition cleansing, the general homotoxicology, and 800 other modules within the skio in order to accomplish that. But if you don't do these basics, no matter what else stray thing you go off onto, some wild pursuit, you really aren't really having the engine to drive you there until you got the power. Okay? Next. Let's just quickly remind you, and I would like to show you, I got 30 minutes left, so I want to show you how fast I would do all of this, as fast as you can watch me do it. But we have a matrix tray that you can look at, a holding tray, a sorting tray, a superconscious tray, a red and purple harmonic coupling tray to see if things are related or not. You could ask, do I have yeast and metals, and see if they're harmonically coupled. You can look at the holding trays for reactants or individual reaction and see what's associated with an issue. You can look at the detox access button, the disease dictionary, the body viewer, the risk profile, all these spinal emotional neurotransmitters, minerals, perverse energy trays, nutrition, homotoxicology, one of my favorites, the stimulate, reaction, duplicate, remedy, and a tray for reporting all of these things. I mean, the number of scalpels you have in your bag is amazing. And you better know how to use every one of those. because at some point or another, you're going to be stumped as a detective as to what's wrong with this, and I need to know which of my tools would help me dissect that better. Next. Fundamentals then, to balance your Bioterrain, you need water for blood flow, oxygen for acid-base control, mineral salts for homeopathic conductivity. You need meridian flow to open up the gates, right? And the biofeedback is a meridian opener. It opens gates for flow. You also could use better orgone-sarcode balancing to make sure that the yin and yang organs are paired up and working in conjunction with each other. You can work on the nutrition and the absorption of the body, especially leaky gut and food poisoning are your friends. They really help you. I do a leaky gut and a food poisoning repair on every single person I ever meet, because my studies in my office show 45% of people are suffering that. And if you can get their leaky gut settled, then your hydration and oxygen and minerals will be much easier to maintain. You can use the dental mapping and find it if they got parasites under their teeth or stuff draining into their bodies as a systemic poison. You can focus on their hormones and transmitters to see whether they're depressed or something is missing. And by the way, if you have a bug in the house, it's going to steal specific things. I want to basically burn this into your brain. Dopamine, adrenaline, is running worms. Worms need to undulate with their head in the soil. So the 40 muscles of your neck up are made of dopamine. If you have a dopamine deficiency from worms, you're going to be tight in your neck. You're going to be looking upwards like an autistic child. You're going to be bouncing, trying to get your blood pressure up. And you're going to be very tense. That's a worm-related catecholamine thief. So your voltage, when it's down, it's worms until proven otherwise. If you go to your amperage, however, the amperage reflects the lymph nodes. So if you have lymph, all fungus and yeast love to stick with fibronectin on lymph. So if your amperage is low, you have a fungal or yeast infection. So the moment that you open up your Verhop score, you can see if they got worms for the low voltage or parasites from a low amperage. Do you follow? Now we can look at homotoxicology to find out why are the poisons in the Bioterrain influenced by miasms or microbes or toxins, and we can now dissect out what is causing this change in the harmonics of the body, especially if there's a second brain engram. And I want to show you how I look at that the very first moment I open up the skio. If I got two brains on the skio the moment I start, I do not want to fix the tapeworm hidden brain. I want to get rid of the second entity before I then fix the person. Otherwise, I'll be feeding all this nutrition to the bugs. So you want to get rid of temporal disturbances and entities early. Next. Just to finish off, to summarize, the skio is a 3D rapid, accurate data bank of probability matrix to map stress indicators that assists in the modulation of self-care. It's precise, it's non-invasive, and subtle energy directed at brain interfaces through the back of your brain, right here, the Wi-Fi port of humans called the reticular activating system. It's versatile. It has multiple waveforms designed for various applications for pain, stress, relaxation, and peak performance. It has homotoxicology for microbes, metals, toxins, and miasms of deeper, more hidden influences. And it has negligible adverse reactions apart from the expected detoxification. Okay? If we're telling people you're going to detox, please say you're going to sweat, you're going to cough up some phlegm, you're going to urinate, and enjoy that new bowel movement you're going to have tomorrow on me. Next. Again, the voltage is the adrenal catecholamines. The amperage is the serotonin in your lymph. So the worms steal the voltage, the funguses steal the amperage. So already before you know much about a person, you can tell whether they're overloaded on their Verhop score as to which side of the Bioterrain graph they're on. Resistances, minerals, entities, hydration as reflected by the phase angle can be improved, especially with lemon in your water to reduce surface tension. The oxygen is in its ability to be in balance is because of the proton and electron pressure that keep your acid-base balance ready and steady. Go ahead. Next. So there are at least, if I show you the next 5 slides in a row, you're going to go, oh, I need a whole other hour on all this. And you do. But let's just quickly go on the fact that if you want to improve Bioterrain balancing, there's modules like Trivector, Risk Factor, Bioterrain, and Electromagnetic Stress. If you want to detox, there's homotoxicology, detox access, allergy desensitization. If you want improved hormones, you've got color frequency therapies, scalar therapy, hormone therapy, cortisol stress therapy. If you want to improve the stress reduction of the autonomic nervous system, you can go into the mental, emotional, spiritual stress reduction, neurotransmitters, and balancing your emotions. If you want improved metabolism, you can use the lymph, edema, cleansing like the short sarcodes, hormone balancing, food poisoning, leaky gut. Next slide. You want to go in relaxation mode, you improve your neurotransmitters, you improve your memory and focus, your language, your relaxation, your mood through all of these different modules. I'm hurrying along with time, but you can see that there's a lot of options for us, right? Next, if you want to improve peak performance, you've got microcirculation, oxygen, nerve and muscle function. Every one nerve at a time you can assess. Every one muscle at a time you can assess. Don't rush? Okay.
Slow down.
Okay.
Because then you're just listening.
Okay, so I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna just show you, but I'm saying to you, look at the breadth and depth of the options that you have here, right? So if you want to have a little bit of an idea about where to start, then working on the pain, stress, and relaxation idea to your client is what's publicly acceptable. But behind the scenes, look at all this other stuff you're doing. They don't necessarily need to know how you're changing the oil and what spark plug you changed, if you don't want to tell them. But you have a massive repertoire of ability, and you need to be able to know where these are and navigate to them the moment that your intuition says to go there. Sports injuries, mitochondrial function, stem cell stimulation, nerve function. I mean, you can't get better. Next. How about for pain management? Pain control, nerve regeneration, muscle control, mineralization, bone healing. I mean, there's so much that we can do for pain because pain is due to acidosis. So if you work on the Verhoeven score and you fix their acidosis, their pain goes away. We don't need a morphine epidemic in the country killing everybody. And by the way, who likes morphine? Does anybody like morphine in this room? Well, you make it yourself. It's called endorphins. But if you were a worm, you need a lot more morphine because you need dopamine. So anybody who's an addict to fentanyl patch is a worm case that's been misdiagnosed. Anybody who's autistic who doesn't have any dopamine left to speak is a worm case that's been misdiagnosed. Since worms love dopamine, and you're craving a dopamine drug of abuse. Now, we've just legalized marijuana, which is a dopamine and GABA stimulant, which is the antidote for worms. Why do you think the government let marijuana get legalized? It's because they don't want to deworm you because you make a good sex addict, drug addict, alcoholic if you have a parasite. So that sells a lot of dough. If you are sick, you're going to need antibiotics, you're going to need... You know, what I'm trying to say is the people who are the most infected with parasites are going to be the biggest addicts because the addict is the parasite craving entity, not the human. Humans don't crave alcohol. We only have enzymes in our liver to digest 1 beer an hour. So if you're drinking 24 beers an hour, you got to have a tapeworm that can handle alcohol dehydrogenase like the tequila worm in the tequila bottle. It is designed to handle alcohol. So I never, since my days of addiction medicine, I never blame the person ever again. I say, you got a worm, buddy. You're a sex addict. Worms copulate or eat. That's all they do. So if you're copulating 6 times a day, you must have a worm in your prostate. So I take the worm out of his prostate, and the guy comes back and says, you're right. All those excessive drives all day long have gone away since I had the tickle taken out of my prostate. Next, the Pulse 9 Quantum Biofeedback then sorts relevant components with an integrated process. It taps into your cellular mechanisms right at the heart of where things are going on in a safe and non-invasive way. It non-invasively accelerates you towards homeostasis naturally without interfering with your processes. It uses trivector energy waves to entrain you with training wheels until you get the hang of it again, temporarily. It is a speedy program that has a massive repertoire for instant use, and you should learn as much as you can with a new module every week of your life. It has personalized self-care in it so that we give the power back to the client. We're not taking care of you. You're taking care of yourself. We're just your coach to help you train back to where you were in balance. You can use multi-user profiles so that thousands can be helped by one SKIO device. That's a great way to save money in a society. It also is portable, upgradable with efficient results, and it has downloads to keep you current with new things that are added all the time. So what other better way can we give you back tools in your shed but by giving you an incredibly safe operational tool that's now FDA regulatorily approved for its safety effects over the last 30 years. Nobody's ever died of a skio. And because a skio is a grand piano full of minerals, have you ever seen anybody die of having a grand piano thrown at them? No. So what we're doing is retraining you with music therapy. Let's go on the last slide here. You can see my website at Best Triage. I have also become a professional doctor of Canadian College of Humanitarian Medicine. I am the director of the Department of Bioenergy. So now we have a department that can legitimize biofeedback. So that's great, because now I can give you guys study credits for every hour you take with me. After 50 hours of credits over the years of what you do, you can get a degree that legitimizes your profession. Okay, so I would like to go. I know take a deep breath. I'm going to put the skio on, and I'm going to show you how I would do a rapid assessment of everything as fast as I can do it. And then you sort of see, I could take all that information, throw it on there, and have a big chunk of data in a small piece of time. Okay? Do you need to stand up and shake a little? I would also mention to you that this protocol that I have in here is on page 281. I wrote every single thing I could think of that the skio could do in a sequential protocol, and after that I wrote a chapter on how to be using clinical pearls, tips, and strategies to do this efficiently if you're in your office and doing it on others. So that's just something that I would like you to be aware of to help you realize that the protocol doesn't have to be set in stone. Okay? I think that protocols might be limiting sometimes because it keeps you from doing your intuitive patterns. So I'm going to pull up a skio, and everybody just shake off for a second. Do you need a 2-minute break, or can you hang in there? Okay. Okay, I'm just going to quickly put the hotel on as the client. You know that when you start a patient, you must use yesterday's date or at least 1 day old, right? You cannot put a client into the skio if it's the same day of their birth. They have to be 1 day old, so I put the hotel here as if it was the 1st of October. Okay? And when you do that, remember that you get a tremendous improvement by looking at the... When you
What she meant by that was not a person, an inanimate object. So the date of birth for a hotel, as an example, right? You would normally use a regular date of birth when putting in your own client.
Or if it's a house, right?
But if it's a house or an inanimate object, that's what she's saying. It has to at least be a day old, right?
Yeah. So I put in here, and I would like you to always, when possible, I know it seems like tedious to do so many little steps, but they make a huge impact because my great brain can never handle more than 8 variables at a time. But if you put in multiple variables and let the computer analyze the data, it can do it rapidly. So don't ever forget to put the geography and the time of birth in there, which activates your biorhythms, okay? So now the biorhythms will be available based on the fact that you've been alive 260 size days. And I always do this first to make sure that it doesn't say 0 date. 0 days alive means I screwed up on my calibration or my patient profile. So if they're not alive for more than a day here, you've got something wrong in your calibration and your setup. Okay? So when you do the time of birth, notice the medical astrology pops up. And if you could add to the report and stimulate your risk factors on this page, every single time the skio requires a treatment of any pattern, it goes to your current rectification button at the end of your day. So every time you treat something even once, even if it's not fully rectified, it goes into the data bank and can be rectified at the end, so you don't have to spend so much time on every module. So I took today's report as well as the general medical report, stimulate the awareness, at least for 1 second, and now all of this data about oxygen and blood stability and whatever the issues are going to be memorized into your current rectifications. Does that make sense to you? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I can hit, and the children's talk, as you know, basically is a quick affirmation to say, where is the stuck point? It says, I respect the planet and the environment, and I will so love and respect every day. Okay? So maybe the respect of the hotel in Vegas is needing to be pushed up. Sin City. Okay. Now, once you've got this organized, of course, then you're going to quickly go into your calibration. But in calibration, you also have the Verhoeven score. You remember that? Under body risk parameters. So if I come back out of here now, and I go over to close and go to the test window, when I calibrate you, I hit virtual all, and when I calibrate the fast track, this other button pops up called body risk parameters, which is your Verhoeven score. So you don't actually have to put somebody through therapy to know what their Verhoeven score is. You can get the vital signs and never even go into the test mode or the treatment mode if you didn't want to. You could run a clinic and say, I'm just doing an obesity clinic and I want to see where your all starting point is, and I'm not spending any time on treating you. I'm just getting your vital signs as my basic baseline. But the benefit of this is that on that page it shows you whether they have psychic attack, second brain engram. It shows you whether the Verhoeven score is so debilitated. So when it asks you, would you like to close the calibration? I take 1 second and say, no. Calibration finished. Do you want to close the calibration? No, I don't. I go over and look at the body electric stress parameters to see what the Verhoeven score looks like, to see if there's one person present or two. One person present would be one column of yellow numbers. But this computer was designed for pregnant women, so if the fetus was in you, or a big tapeworm with another brain, it shows up as a second column of another entity, another infection. So I already know before I even open this that there's a severe infection showing up over here with all these second column of yellow numbers. And look at the resistance here, minus 2,064. So this infection is sucking out 2,000% of the minerals of this person. That's how you know that they're in the adaptive phase and very sluggish. So now we look here at the proton-electron pressure. If it's 70-70 equal, I know their acid-base balance is pretty good, so their oxygen is probably pretty good. But if they had a very high proton pressure here, what would that mean? Yeast infection in the colon, high pH in the gut. So if this is 7.4, it's the normal pH of blood, but if it's 8.4, it's the pH of yeast, remember? On the far right-hand side. So you already know that this person has a high electron pressure. There must be pus in the house with a high electron pressure, and therefore I would take serious that this infection is for real. And secondly, that the infection is causing their mean resonant frequency pattern to be 17,000 up here, meaning they're very stressed. So this infection is clearly stressing the person, and I say to them right off the bat, it looks like you have some interference in your system. Does that make sense to you? Have you been doing this? No? Now I know that they got an entity, so do I want to go and test them to see what the entity's issues are and fix the hangnail on the tapeworm in them? No. So if I go to risk neutralization first and tune the harmonics, it should be 7830 for the first harmonic, meaning Om, 78.3. Well, if it's not 78.3, then the room may be sick and the harmonics could be flattened in the room, or it could be that the person is sick and flattened in their harmonics. So you might want to just check the room here and see if the room is geopathically stressed to cause this second brain engram. Is it just a moldy room that we're in and we're picking up mold from that second brain engram? Or could it be that there's some electrical stress in this room? So it says, no, there's no major geopathic stress in this room. So now watch what I do carefully. I close the calibration, and I reopen it again before I do a test, and I go back to neutralization. Normally a second button pops up saying temporal disturbance. Maybe I didn't get it the second time here. Or maybe that's slightly changed. See, the second time I open it says treat temporal anomaly. So now I'm taking out that second column of yellow numbers before I even open them to test them. I'm getting rid of the spiritual Klingons so that I'm testing more of the individual and not all that junk around them. So I treat the temporal anomaly before I start if there's a second column of numbers, or if they have a high resonant frequency pattern. I know that something is interfering with the field. And you would be able to see this if you looked at an aura scan and they'd had a big black blob in the aura. So this is one way where you can clean the decks, because if you have ever been in a session, sometimes these entities crash your session, you have to start all over. But if you get rid of them right from the beginning, the session goes smoother and there's not these dropouts or stoppings points. And here's where you see it on the scan. You look over as this is flashing. Is the temporal disturbance there? Is there an inductance disturbance, meaning voltage? Is there a capacitance disturbance, meaning amperage?
That's on the steel working box.
That's on the box. Yeah. So now I'm going to go in to the test mode, prepare the test, and as I'm preparing the test, you're looking at the Verhop scores while you're sitting here. Voltage 58, that's low adrenals, low catecholamines. I suspect a worm, because worms love dopamine and adrenaline. Number 2, the amperage is 83%, so the lymph nodes are pretty good. I doubt that there's a massive roaring yeast infection to suck all the serotonin out of you. Serotonin is found 95%. Where? Ascending colon. Ascending colon is an elevator shaft that must move up against gravity. So serotonin and dopamine are like Christmas tree lights, pairs, patches, all the way up the ascending colon to push up the elevator so it can go over and out. So 5% of serotonin is in your occipital cortex for vision, which is why yeast patients get fluffy vision. And 95% of your amperage is in your ascending colon. So if that amperage is low, they got a colitis, a yeast infection, a worm in their colon, something weird going on in the colon. The resistance is 54, so the minerals are shot. That means that this session is going to be awfully slow because they don't have mineral enzymes to make things work fast. The hydration is 89, which is excellent, and the oxygen is 87. However, the vitality is only 5 out of 10 with high interference with organs, ECG, and degeneration. Even though the speed is normal, the mean reaction of resonance is 17,000, so they're agitated and stressed. And what I say to my clients, I say to them, oh, it's not your imagination. You have been stressed. Look at these numbers here. And they feel so legitimized, right? It's not in your mind. These are physical numbers that show, indeed, that you are struggling. The phase angle is 9 out of 10, excellent. If it was 6 or 3, you'd be worried. And the reactance and impedance is really a reflection of how good are your minerals. If the minerals are low, you're going to be sluggish on the phase response and impedance. So we've finished our test. We come to the new report. And now I want you to pay attention because I'm going to go rapidly because I'm in my office and I know that I got another person coming in an hour. And I want to know what this brand new person to me, this stranger, has that I should be focusing on. Even though they told me it's their left toenail hangnail, I know that it's more than that. So I tend to go in this pattern. First of all, I always bring up the info view first, and I let the computer make the report. Make your SOC report. Make your AccuFive systems. It says 108 on lungs, 104 on spleen, so I already know there is something going on with infection if the spleen and large intestine are infected. Then I ask for the allergy or the SAR code report, which has nothing in it until I do the SAR codes. I then go down to the ISOD report and see what's bugging them, and it says all funguses, food poisoning, and worms are in the normal range. I scroll up a bit, and it says radiation poisoning. So right away on the situation hold button, I already write the word radiation. I already am seeing where the trouble spots are from the very first moment. Radiation and chlorine, fluorine toxicity, and the remedies for those I can put up already on the whole tray called Chlorex and Algin. So I'm already working on the solutions right from the first get-go. Now I go back and I look at what about the body fat, and if you haven't done the body fat calculations, it may not be completely accurate unless you put their height and weight in, okay? If you want to take a bit of time in beginning to do that. I want to look at their aggravations and causes to see if I'm in the right ballpark, and it says family stress, mental stress, but the lowest score is allergies and karma. Again, you can do the therapy here, top and bottom. If you do it for 1 minute, all of these 20 markers go into your current rectification button at the end. So do you have to spend a whole half hour on this? No. If you just do at least one treatment on every one window, even if it's not corrected to over 85% finished. You can do that when you leave at the end under current rectifications to save a lot of time. Do you follow? So now I'm adding in these 29, causes at their percentage points so that the computer only ever pays attention to things that are over 100. Excuse me. Now, we look at the aggravations. And if I'm doing a long-distance remote skio, I usually do a screenshot of this and send it to the client and say, you had a scan today, here's how you looked when we started. The risk profile being the best graph of all because it has everything in the whole computer on one page. You don't have to really get involved with a lot of other reports to the client. Okay, so now I'm out of there. And again, if I do top and bottom balance, I'm taking all of these markers and putting it over to current rectifications, which is the button when you leave the skio, right? When we exit, is there any last homework to be done? So I'm stacking the homework page and I'm doing it rather anonymously. I'm not attached to the outcome. I'm just making sure that I have a very thorough map. Because once the computer sees with thoroughness where you're standing out, the most discrepant things will keep stacking up on top of each other, every window. Now, I also look here very commonly to see if the pathogens are out of whack, and in here it does say the pathogens are high. So as soon as you have a pathogen problem, you want to make sure that you're aware of what pathogens. So go to the risk profile now. Click on the risk factors. It's making me a map. And now I go, and I've been taught to do the top 2 items and the bottom 2 items. I discarded that in my practice, and I do all the major red zones here. I double-click, 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 and now the top main areas in pink are already now here on my treatment line. Right? Up top here. So now I can copy that line, Control Copy, put it over here on my Situation Hold button. I think I have to close it to do that, but it's on my Control Copy. And now I always add the risks to a graph, and I make the report of the whole graph all at once, and then treat top and bottom balance. So again, I'm saving hours of time dissecting every one thing at a time. And all of these will go into my current rectifications, and it's giving me an idea that we have lymphatic exhaustion, inflammation, and infection in the liver at the bottom under a score of 60. So should I be working up here at the top end where it's all normal? No. This is telling me where they're stubborn, and it's the bottom end that's the most stubborn. So I personally have trained myself more often to work at the bottom end of the most stubborn things rather than at the top where everything is acutely being taken care of by the body, which apparently has enough energy to react to these upper areas. Now, as I go out of that, I go to the top issue and double-click it and ask for the virtual doctor test on the sickest top item and at the sickest bottom item so that I get even more detail about what the solution should be. If the solution keeps saying spiritual, 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 then it might direct me to a spiritual procedure. If it says infection, 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 I might go off to the infection panel. And so it allows you to sort of functionally, and every time you're going to make a report, right, and treat for at least one pass. And as soon as you treat for one pass, even if it's not rectified all the way to the top amount of 85% or more rectified, you're going to pick that up when you go to current rectifications at the end. Now, one of the things that I do like to do is go into the blood field, the nutrition or time, but it might be a bit intense for us to do today with the shortness of time. But if you do have one ingredient here that's way out of whack, go and check out the homotoxicology on that organ and make sure you pick the organ for the sub-menu. Maybe I should just show you that. So say, for instance, we know that it's gastric lining here that says there's trouble. So if I go into homotoxicology, I'm going to, first of all, info click first and see where their bioterrain is. Are they in the center point or not? They're not. So we do have a bioterrain problem here. They are sitting over here in an alkaline field, We're already got them back down here into the first quadrant by the end of our little bit of work here already. But I wanted to point out to you, see where this circle is close to the gray line here? I find this the most dangerous part of the whole graph. This is where blood clots and pesticides live. So if somebody is sitting right on this line, pesticides are anti-estrogens, or they may be having estrogen in their life from too much yeast infection, or they might have birth control pills on their body, but for some reason, I noticed that this is where tapeworms live. Tapeworms love estrogen, they love pesticides. So when I see somebody sitting right here, I almost know for a fact they've got a tapeworm in their pancreas somewhere. And if they fall over this line and one of these circles is over to the edge of the graph, you know that they're going to die. If somebody has this black circle on the edge of the bottom of the circle or way over here, they are about to die. They're so extreme from their pH control. So you pay extreme close attention to those people. So now I can go into xenobiotics, but what do I want to do? I want to pick the most sickest organ in blue. So I see down here that in blue it says the serodermal serous membranes are the most sick. I'm going to look at what poison is the sickest in there by clicking on the blue. And in the whole tray, I control paste everything that I pulled off my risk factor. Remember I memorized the top red zones in my risk factor profile? I stuck it in here. And in the specific allopathic remedy, I put the words algin and the Clorox remedy because that was where they had the highest need for clarification. And now when I search, the sub-search, I'm getting the top 5 items and I'm getting a specific ideal chlorine poisoning. See, it's at 169 here now. And I'm also getting a look at the right or left spin. So now the right spin is 42, the left spin is 48. So they're slightly spinning more to the to the left. But if that was reversed and it said a right spin greater than a left, you know they've already had a terrible bioterrain and they've already landed over in quadrant 3 or 4 and they're probably pretty sick. Okay? So if you don't have that left spin starting to dominate, then you as a therapist aren't doing your job. If you come back and somebody 12 weeks later is still spinning to the right, you have not corrected their bioterrain components of voltage or amps or resistance somehow. I would like to also mention to you that the positive and negative magnetism here sometimes is a bit hard to interpret. And I personally feel that the body any one number is not so important as much as the trend. Is it moving better towards health or is it moving away from health? So if these numbers get worse and worse as you're working, you're doing something wrong. Now, on this page, we've got all of these things now treated, right? Because I treated them for the top 5. This is going to go to current rectifications. So do I need to spend a whole bunch more time here? Well, I would always look at miasms because they block everything. If you have a psychotic miasm, then you probably had worms and psychosis in your family tree, so you might have more voltage and disturbance and more worm risk in this lifetime, say. So once you clear up those miasms, they are permanently cleared. That's the best part of miasms. Once you take the trench coat of your parents off, you're not back in their womb again. You're not going to get those influences again. So people who are stubborn or stuck go after the miasms and clear the backlog. Now, you could sit here for hours and touch on each yellow button one by one by one by one by one. Or you could use your own typing skills and write them down here on the bottom. Okay, chiropractic blockage, cellular necrosis, deficiency of enzymes, deficiency of vitamin A, deficiency of phosphorylation thinking enzymes, metabolic disruption from paraquat or herbicide. That's what I wanted you to notice. Remember I said it has to be a pesticide if it's on that the cliff between quadrant 3 and 4. So here's the pesticide that's doing it. So now that I know that I'm right, that there was a pesticide, now I look back and it says this pesticide, which is an anti-estrogen, is going to cause cancer of reproductive organs, cancer of serous tissue. By the way, you only have to use the first 5 letters of any word. You don't have to spell the whole word out. And immunity. Now, I could hit the add to my info page, and I could also do a universal treatment of that, coming up here, detox them, and now I'm taking out the pesticides, I'm taking out the chlorine, I'm creating a direct, immediate solution to the urgent problem at hand. Have you got any questions on that? So, find out what is the highest risk factor, go into homotoxicology on that risk factor, and go into the organ that that risk factor seems to be pointing to, and find out what poison is stuck in that one organ to make it the worst, weakest link in the chain. Now, I've memorized all these details, and even if I didn't wait for this to go up to 100% rectification, and I'm in a hurry, which I am right now on stage, I could still stop the detox, and all those details would go into my current rectification panel. Okay, so just for the sake of argument, I'm just going to quickly stop that, come back, and always save this information below to the report, close it, and now all of the details are up in here, and the organ that was most sick was the gastric organs, or leaky gut syndrome, or food poisoning, and pesticide poisoning, and chlorine poisoning. And again, you could make a report here. If you wanted to, you can again stimulate detox for 3 minutes if you wanted to, okay? Now I'm just going to pass by that quickly and come out of there. And look at my organs. If you don't know what organ is sick, of course, go into the organ panel. I like the organ panel early on because I often make mistakes by making assumptions. So when I look on here, it says the brow chakra, the heart are the highest organs of concern, and the stomach. I'm sure you all know this, but if you touch anything in the first column here, column number 1, it takes care of everything in all column 2, 3, and 4. You know that? So if you take the first chakra column, when you fix something in column number 1, everything related to it in column 2, 3, and 4 is corrected. So stick on column 1 for speed. And again, I'm going to hit the stomach in there. And I don't necessarily have to stay here till everything is completely rectified. It's only 36% rectified, but I have more things to do. I want to put on the mental focus, so I treat the brain. And those 3 things now have given my body a lot of direction as to where the rest of the session should go. Now, I would like to also remind you that almost everybody has nutritional issues, and if you want to just quickly do a nutrition strike, if they have no minerals left in the body, you're in big trouble. If you want to look at the tissue salts, I find them very helpful because most people are low in minerals, and I like to give them some homework as to go home and fix the minerals. Now, if I come into this page here and every single mineral is fine, then I don't have to sweat. But here it says there are some lack of potassium, lack of jasmine. So give it a little shot. It only takes a second. And again, all of this is going into current rectifications. Right? So I don't necessarily have to spend too much time on any one module. I'm in a discovery mode of gathering information as much as I can on the first visit to see what the body is talking to me about. And I try not to be too biased or go down the rabbit hole too early down one pathway when I haven't looked at the wider scope. Create the report and close, make a master nutrition report. Now, would you like to do anything else here? Well, certainly, the spinal program is pretty amazing, right? If you have the electricity flowing through every spinal nerve to every organ, and you have all the acupuncture open to every organ, don't you think your biofeedback is going to get to the target organ better? So although it does take a couple of minutes, almost everybody feels better when their spine is done, and I tend to do it very often whether they ask me to or not, because I want to see if their emotions are stuck in their back. The NEC, neuro-emotional complex, really tells me whether this is a physical, emotional, mental problem. And it's never only one of those, it's always all of them. But sometimes you don't know whether to go into the person physically. In fact, men, they never want you to start with the emotions. I shouldn't say never. But they like the physicality of this first, and then they'll ease towards the emotional. Whereas a woman might come in already saying, I'm so emotional, I don't know why, and then you come in here and you say, oh, well, you've got a terrible worm that made a kink in your neck and you can't get blood flow to your head. So, depending on how the client, what they like to know about, I give them what they want to hear. I tend to over-educate them. They go home with their head spinning sometimes too much. So it's better off to say less and say, look at how many organs in your body are in such great shape. You've been doing good care on yourself. But did you notice there's a couple of red zones here? Your bone marrow and your heart feels kind of tired. Does that sound like you? Yeah, my heart's so tired. So you're giving them an option to you don't say, you have this. You say, does that sound like you? And if they say, no chance, it's nothing to do with me, go on to something else. But if they are in emotional state of some disreputed stress, it's going to show up here jammed up in their spine. And I want to make one comment. All the vertebrae of your back are made of sulfur and silver discs. If you have parasites sucking all the sulfur out of your liver and your kidneys and your skin and your discs, then your discs will shrink, they'll pinch the nerves of the back, and you will have multiple back disturbances. As opposed to a person who hurt their back and they got one injury at one vertebrae, if every single vertebrae says not corrected or some problem, you might be starting to think that person's discs may be so low in sulfur that maybe they have a parasite sucking all their basic raw ingredients out of their body, and it's reflected in their entire spinal cord or spinal column. So don't forget about sulfur deficiency. And the remedy that kills all parasites in the worm world is called Nat Sulf under your tissue salts. I want you to remember that kills almost every tapeworm, roundworm, pinworm, flukeworm. It's a cheap trick. If you want to learn, if somebody comes up with Nat Sulf on the top of their scan, you know that they've probably got a parasite. Now, if you look at this, enter the substance here. I like to add the sulfur back into everybody. So when I look at the spine, I don't do 2 passes on the spine. I do 1 pass on the spine, 1 pass on NEC, so I see the second panel that pops open saying load substance. Then I can put back colloidal silver and sulfur in their spine, and I can put in vitamin C and zinc and hyaluronic acid. I can rebuild their body with the raw materials that they might have been missing. So let's go for a fact and see that there's a lot of neuroemotional complexes. So let's put in here Nat Sulf. Or you could put in Kali Mir, or zinc metallicum, or argentum nitricum, which is colloidal silver. And you could also put in your hyaluronic acid or vitamin C, which makes your joints and connective tissues. Or you could put in here collagen, elastin. And I'm going to load these substances now into the spine, and I'm going to give them back an emotional treatment on top of the minerals that would help them stabilize this area. So now I've got a more stable, shall we say, a stable hotel where I can talk to different components of the body more easily because each part of the body is now better innervated. Now, I would like, if I had time, to go back to the Hamer conflicts, because if they've got this many neuroemotional conflicts here, you can bet that they've got a neuroemotional complex up here. And Dr. Hamer's work was so brilliant. He showed this. If you emotionally blow a fuse up here, then the light bulb down the hall will not light up again, no matter how many times I change the light bulb down here. If I blew the fuse panel in the basement, I'm not going to innervate that organ. So by allowing us to see where the neuroemotional complexes are, we might have a slightly better idea where the Hamer conflicts are, and we can go looking for those deep, deep wounds that blew a fuse. He's cruising. It's time to wrap it up. So if you have to wrap it up and somebody comes to your office, you don't worry about stopping this interview right now. You know how much I've done? I've done 20 years of work already on them. And if you have to quickly, suddenly leave, or the person has to leave, if you immediately go to current rectifications, you've already got a lot of raw data there to do a cleanse and a rapid exit. Now, if they are low in a Verhoeven score, you're going to use your trivector, right? Because the trivector builds up the entire bioterrain. So it's not a bad idea to do a trivector on anybody, everybody, all the time. And you'll notice that the trivector is often asked for more commonly than others. So now we're closed here. We got all these corrections. See how many corrected? Now I leave. I leave. I always make a report on each screen if I haven't already. I leave. I leave. Now I'm back to my main matrix. Now here's 3 more tricks, okay? I promise I'll get out of here soon. Load the top 200 remedies onto the list. I have to leave soon, but I didn't have a chance to look at which homeopathic remedies, which nutrition you needed. So ask the person to use their top 200 items. And use the bottom 100 items to the grid. And now I've got this beautiful report, which is much like mimicking a quantum clarity report. But you're allowing now the entire system here to be over here added to the load report. You see that? And I could give it all back at once. Instead of waiting 10 hours to do one at a time, I can do all of those 300 items simultaneously. Now, I would go back a step myself, and I would go to Chart Maker and say, well, this list, let's even do it more. Load the acupuncture chart. Yes, fill it, and program rectify it. If you rectify it only once, it goes to current rectifications. It's 65% or 85%, but even if it doesn't go over 85, I can go now to the Ayurvedic chart, load it, rectify it. Go to the chiropractic chart, load it, rectify it. Load the dental program and rectify it. Load the homeopathic report and rectify it. See how fast I'm going, guys? Naturopathic report, rectify it. Load Nelson report, make a report, and rectify it. And here, if you see these numbers dropping, you're doing a bad job. They should all be climbing. Nutrition report. Look how big the nutrition report is because I went there for 1 second. Load the probability scores of diseases. Load the psych report. Rectify it. Load the solutions report. Calculate solutions, add it to the report, add the report, and rectify it. Oops, sorry, went too far. Rectify it. Where is it here? Rectify it. And if you'd like, if you want to just quickly go to risk chart, rectify, right? Now, I leave here, and now this whole thing has all of these things on here. I'm going to unload the report because I did it halfway. Now I'm going to reload it, and it's got the whole disease dictionary on it. It's got everything on it, right? Now when I go and do an auto zap for 3 minutes, I'm doing everything that they asked me for the whole hour all at once. And if it was 50% or 60 or 70 or 80, the computer's going to try and push everything to 85. I did that in 20 minutes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Deb Drake.
Pleasure.
So you see what I mean? How much space is there left? It merits a stander. For sure it does.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure teaching. It's a thrill for me as well. And I love you all, and I send you all the best intentions to get well yourselves and make sure you stay well so you can spread this around the world.